we're going to be talking about adding and subtracting integers. We're going to need to remember some of our things for multiplying and dividing integers. This is the last set of notes for this unit, so let's go ahead and get started right now. So here we are at example A, and it says simplify the expression 4 minus 7, or 4 and negative 7. Either way you want to look at it, that sign means both negative and subtraction. They're the same thing. So now I'm going to use two different models to figure out this problem. I'm going to use counters, and then I'm going to use a number line. So let's start with my counters. So I'm going to start by understanding that these are two separate numbers. On one side is positive 4, and on the other side is negative 7. So I'm going to pull out counters for each of those numbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is have positive 4. So I'm going to pull out 4 positive counters. Then I've got negative 7. So I'm going to pull out 7 negative 1 counters to represent my negative 7. So now I've got 4 on one side, negative 7 on the other. The way I'm going to figure out what the correct answer is I'm going to cancel out until I have only one side left. So I'm going to cancel out one positive 1, one negative 1, 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 and oh look, I'm out of positives, so I can no longer cancel out any positives. So I can only talk about what I have left, and I have 3 negative 1s left, so my answer is negative 3. Now, let's show how that works on a number line. So on my number line, I'm going to start out by knowing that I'm going positive 4. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to go to positive 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my number line, I originally went out to positive 4. Now I'm going to go negative 7 the other direction because that's my second number. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm here at negative 3. So either model that I used ended up getting me the correct answer, whether I was canceling out things because they just crash into each other, they're on opposite teams, or I used a number line model. Both models work. Let's take a look at example B. Here we are at example B, and again it says to simplify the expression negative 1 minus 6 or negative 1 negative 6. Either way you look at it, they both mean negative, they both mean subtraction. It's the same symbol. So now again, I'm going to use two methods. I'm going to use counters and I'm going to use a number line. Now, if it's easier for you to think of this with a negative 1 like around in a box and this is a negative 6 around in a box so that you know they're two separate numbers, feel free to draw a box around them. So now I'm going to pull out counters for negative 1. So I've got negative 1 counter over here. And then I'm going to pull out negative 6 counters for the other side. So negative 6 counters over here. Now, I'm going to cancel out anything that's the opposite of each other. But in this particular problem, I have no opposites. They're all on the same team. They're all on the negative team. They're not going to fight each other and cancel each other out. So I'm going to just add them up. How many negatives do I have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 negative 1 counters left. So my answer is negative 7. So now I'm going to go down and I'm going to use my number line model to see how that works again. So I'm going to go out to negative 1 for the first one. And then I'm going to go another negative 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that brings me to negative 7. So either model I use got me the correct answer. Let's have you try some on your own. Here we are at practice number 1. It says simplify the expressions. You're going to try both of these problems here on your own. I want you to do the best you can. You can use either model, the counters or the number line. Both are there for you. You can either use the counters that you picked up from the front of the room, or you can draw counters on here either way. So go ahead and pause the video now, do the best that you can, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get both answers correct? Notice that I decided to use the counters model. I did not use the number line. So if you use the number line, that's okay. As long as you got the same answers that I did, positive 7 and negative 9. If your paper doesn't look like mine, go ahead and change your answers now and copy down the work that I have. Then let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So here in example C, it says write the expression that represents by the model. So this time I have the model and I have to figure out what it says as opposed to making the model up myself. So the first one I've got counters, and the second one I've got a number line. So I'm going to start by reading the counters. So the first counters I have there at the top are -1 counters, and I've got 5 of them. So I know the first part of my problem is a -5. Now the second part of my problem, I've got 2 counters there. They're +1, so I know it's going to be +2. Now I'm going to just cancel out so that I know that I have how many left. So I've got a negative counter here canceled out, a negative counter here canceled out, a positive counter here, and a positive counter here. So I am left with 3 -1 counters. So I know my simplified expression is -3. Now let's take a look at my number line model. So my number line down there at the bottom, my first arrow goes from 0 to -5. So I know my first number is -5. And then my second number line is very tiny, but it goes from -5 to -4. So it only goes one space in the positive direction. So I know that that number is +1. So then I'm going to cancel out, or in this case, the number line model stops right at -4. So I know my answer is -4. Go ahead and make sure that your paper looks like mine. And then let's try another practice problem. All right, here we are at practice number 2, and now you're going to try these type of problems on your own. You got a counter model at the top and a number line model at the bottom. Go ahead and pause the video now, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get both problems correctly? Did you notice that in the first one they were all the same counter, so you didn't have to do any canceling, you just had to add? Hopefully you did that. And on the bottom, hopefully you were able to figure out the number line problem. If not, go ahead and make sure that your paper looks like mine. And then let's move on to some key ideas. All right, here we are at some key ideas. And if I notice up there in the right-hand corner, I've got -1 minus -7 or minus -7. And that doesn't look like any problem that we've had before. So let's talk about how we're going to solve those problems. So often integer expressions have double signs, like our one up there with our -7. So we have some steps to simplify it. We're going to eliminate the double signs. So we only want to have one sign on each number. Determine the single sign by using our multiplication and division rules. Oh, that's going to come in handy. Those division and multiplication rules are those 4 faces that we've talked, right? A positive times a positive is a positive. Negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative gives you a negative both times. Then we're going to find the numerical value. We're going to combine, or we call that adding, if they have the same sign. And we're going to find the difference, or subtracting, if they have different signs. So let's go ahead and put that into practice. So here we are at example D, and it says simplify the expression. And we've got that expression from the other page with our -1 minus -7, or -1 minus -7. However you want to look at it, it means the same thing. So I've got double signs. I've got a negative and a negative. So I'm going to just put a little box around them so that I see I've got a negative and a negative. Now I'm going to use my multiplication and division rules to figure out what the single sign should be. So I've got a negative and a negative, so that is going to give me a positive. So I know the single sign I want is a positive. So I'm going to rewrite my problem so that I've got -1 plus 7. So there what I've done is I've eliminated the double sign. I had a minus and a minus, or negative and a negative, same thing. And now they are a plus. So now I can do one of two things. I know that they have different signs. My first number has a negative symbol. My second number has a positive symbol. And when I was told to do that, I would find the difference. So I could figure out that 7 and -1 is going to give me 6, and then I would have 6 left over. But I'm going to use my counter model here just to make sure that I got it right. So if I did the math, I should know that my positives are going to win because my positive number is bigger than my negative number, or it has a greater absolute value. So the number with the larger greater absolute value is 7. So I know that my answer is going to be positive no matter what. So then I'm going to take away 1. 7 minus 1 is 6. And then since I know my answer is going to be positive, my answer should be positive 6. But let's check the counter model just to make sure. So on one side, I should have positive 7. On the other side, I should have -1. I'm going to cancel out using my counter model. And look, I have positive 6 left over. So yes, using my counter model proves that this method without using counters works. And that's good because I don't want to be carrying around a pocket full of counters all the time or drawing circles all over my page just to figure out integer problems. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. So here we are in example E, and it says simplify the expression 10 plus negative 3, or 10 plus minus 3. Either way, it has two signs, and we've got to get rid of those two signs. So I'm going to draw a box around my two signs so I know where they are. So I've got a positive on here and a negative over here, so those are my two signs. Then I'm going to use my division rules or multiplication rules. Positive times a negative is a negative, so I know my single sign is going to be negative. So I'm going to have 10 minus 3 if I rewrite my problem. So now I don't really need to do anything fancy there. Hopefully I know what 10 minus 3 is. I don't need to pull out counters for that. I don't need to do anything fancy with a number line. I should know what 10 minus 3 is, and 10 minus 3 is 7. So my correct answer here is 7. You can pull out the counters if you want to make sure that you are correct. I've got positive 7 and I've got negative 3 here. If I were to cancel those out, or sorry, positive 10 and negative 3, if I were to cancel out, I end up with positive 7. So the counter model does work, but you should not need it to figure out what 10 minus 7 is. That should be pretty explanatory to everyone. Now let's try some practice problems on your own. Here we are at practice number 3. There are two problems for you to try there on your own. I want you to pause the video now, do the two problems on your own, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get both answers correct? Did you get positive 3 on one side and negative 4 on the other? Did you make sure to rewrite your problem without the double signs? That's a very important step that you have there. So on one side I should have had negative 1 plus 4, and on the other side I should have positive 4 minus 8. Now on the positive 4 minus 8, notice the minus 8 had the greater absolute value, so my answer was going to be negative. Again, if I subtract them because they have different signs, 8 minus 4, that turns out to be correct, and then the sign is going to be negative because the negative sign is the one with the larger absolute value in this case. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Here we are at example F, and it says simplify the expressions. And I've got negative 34 minus 81, or negative 34 minus negative 81. And on the other side, I've got 26 minus 73. Okay, now we're down to having to really use our rules about addition and subtraction, because we're not going to be carrying around 81 counters or 73 counters with us in our pockets. So we're going to have to figure out a method to use that without having our counters laying around. So the first thing I'm going to do in number 1 is determine if I've got a double sign, which I do. I've got a negative and a negative, so I'm going to put a box around those because I know those are two signs there. So a negative and a negative are going to give me a positive. So now I'm going to rewrite my problem. So I'm going to rewrite it as negative 34 plus 81. So now I have to do some math. I have to determine which number has the greater absolute value. Well, 34 is 34 away from 0. 81 is 81 away from 0. So that one is going to have the larger absolute value. So since 81 has the larger absolute value and it is positive, since they are different signs, I know that I'm going to have a positive answer. So now I'm going to do some subtraction or find the difference because they have different signs. So I would do 81 minus 34, and when I do that, I end up with 47. And since the positive number has the greatest absolute value, positive 47 is my answer. Let's take a look at the second one. On the second one, I've got 26 minus 73. There are no double signs here, so I don't have to do any wiping out there, but they have different signs. I've got a positive 26 and a negative 73, so I have to determine which one has the greater absolute value. And in this case, the 26 is only 26 away from 0, and the 73 is 73 away from 0, so I know my answer is going to be negative because it has the greatest absolute value. So now I'm going to do some subtraction since they have different signs, and I'm going to get 73 minus 26 is 37. But I know my answer will be negative because the negative had the greatest absolute value, so my answer is going to be negative 37. So before you begin your subtraction, you need to make sure that you've determined which sign is the correct answer. So I know since negative 73 had the greatest absolute value, that my answer was going to be negative. So I had to figure that out before I did my subtraction, because otherwise, if I didn't, I'd just go, oh, 73 minus 26 is 37. My answer must be 37, and I would have gotten it incorrect. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Here we are at practice problem number 4. There are a couple problems there for you to try on your own. I want you to do the best that you can. Remember, they are very large numbers, so you can't use your counters here. You're going to have to either remember to add them if they have the same sign or subtract them if they have different signs. Go ahead and pause the video now, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get both answers correct? Notice that on one side I had two negative numbers, the negative 55 and the negative 49. Since they had the same sign, I needed to make sure that I added those numbers together. And obviously then my answer would be negative, because just adding negatives upon negatives is going to give you a negative answer. And on the other side, the 81 had the greater absolute value, so that's why my answer turned out to be positive. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next problem. Here we are at example G. Mathlandia is 600 feet above sea level. Historia is 100 feet below sea level. What is their difference in elevation? Write an expression to model the problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through and find all of the important information for myself, and I'm going to highlight it so that I know what I'm pulling out of this problem. So Mathlandia is 600 feet above. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that because that's probably important information. Historia is 100 feet below. So again, that is going to be important information. What is the difference in their elevation? Difference. Difference means subtraction. That's important. I'm going to head and underline or highlight that if I don't have a highlighter. So now I'm going to write an expression. So Mathlandia is 600 feet above. So I know that's going to be a positive 600. Historia is 100 feet below. So I know that's going to be a negative 100. So now I have to figure that out. But I need to know which kind of math I'm doing here. It says to find the difference. So I know that's going to be subtraction. So I'm going to subtract the two of them. So now I've got 600 minus 100, or 600 minus negative 100. Either way, it means the same thing, but what it means for me is I have double signs. So I've got a negative sign and a negative sign, so that's going to be a positive. So I'm going to rewrite my problem as 600 plus 100. There, I've rewritten my sign. Oh, good news. I may not need any math for this. I may know what 600 plus 100 is, but if I don't, I'm going ahead and put them on top of each other. 600 plus 100 is equal to 700. So I know that since they're the same sign, they're going to be the same sign. I know it's going to be positive 700, but this is a word problem, so I need a word answer. And since we're talking about feet, my answer is going to be 700 feet. Go ahead and make sure that your problem looks like mine, and then let's have you try one on your own. Here we are at practice number 5. The actual temperature is negative 30 degrees Celsius. The wind chill is negative 150 degrees Celsius. What is the difference between the temperature and the wind chill? Write an expression to model the problem. So you're going to head and try this one on your own. You're going to pause the video now. Make sure you either highlight or underline the important information, then complete the problem and press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to figure out the answer is 120 degrees Celsius? Notice that it's going to be a positive change because you have two signs there. You're going to wipe them out and make it a positive answer. Hopefully your problem looks like mine and that you highlighted all of the answers, all the important information inside the problem. This brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will see you in the next one.